Thanks for listening to Wrestling Changed My Life, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today's guest is UFC Hall of Famer, former UFC World Champion, Pat Miletich. Where do you even begin with a guy like this? He was the first UFC welterweight champ, winning the title out in Brazil, in the trenches out there, and then went on to lead the Miletich Fighting System, which at one point in time had 3 UFC champs on the roster, not to mention Robbie Lawler, who was waiting in the wings. So this is just an iconic podcast. Hope you all enjoy it. Of course, Pat wrestled in his past. Who hasn't? Who's worth their salt? So sit back and enjoy this one, folks. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time. Enjoy the show.
Well, I was a fanatic. There's no doubt, a fanatic. My goal was to get carried out of the wrestling room because of exhaustion, and it never happened. The thing it did for me every day about 6 o'clock is that when I got out, I looked back in and there was nobody else there. Bottom line was, I didn't reach my goal. So guess what happened? I went back in the room again. But I got some quality time because of just some kind of a fanatic goal.
Pat Miletich, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Glad to be here, buddy.
Absolutely. So there's a lot to be said about you. UFC Hall of Famer. You're on the Joe Rogan podcast, and you're just growing up in the Quad Cities. I know a lot about you, but I don't know kind of how you got started with wrestling and what your family was like growing up. So maybe just take us way back to kind of middle school, high school, and how'd you get involved with the sport, and what was it like growing up for you?
Well, I mean, I got involved in wrestling, and I think I was probably 6 at the time. It was kind of I vaguely remember being in the gymnasium, and what it was all the elementary boys from Bettendorf, Iowa, which was a wrestling powerhouse long before I was in high school or anything. They had kind of a wrestling seminar to get kids familiar with wrestling, and Tom McCutcheon and Glenn, another guy, they ran the middle school program. They were incredible coaches. And what they did was they taught all the elementary gym teachers how to wrestle if they didn't know how to wrestle, or they tried to make sure that they put those type of people in place in all the elementary schools so they could start the elementary programs in all the elementary schools. Then by the time those kids got to middle school, they would have the basics understanding of wrestling by the time they hit 6th grade. And then McCutcheon and Glenn would take over, turn us into machines. And then we'd go into high school where our team was generally number 1, 2 in the state of Iowa. So, but I went for this seminar and I was walking home. All the kids were leaving. And for whatever reason, me and this other kid got into it, and he took me down and slapped me around a little bit. And I couldn't get away from him. I couldn't figure out what was going on. Obviously, he knew how to wrestle, and then I realized, I found out from one of my friends, they said that's Tom McCutcheon's son, John, and he's the middle school wrestling coach's son. So I said, all right, well, I got to stick with this wrestling thing because that was not fun at all. I wasn't digging that. So I started wrestling, at that point, pretty much. I committed to it. I was horrible all through elementary for the most part. I lost, got pinned a lot. Got a little better in middle school and slowly got better. But ultimately, wrestling, although I did it more because of the freestyle in the summer and summer tournaments and all that sort of stuff when I was a kid, wrestle all winter. And then during the summer, I actually wrestled more than I played football, but I wrestled to stay in shape for football because all my brothers were real big, tall guys. And I figured, well, I'm going to play linebacker at Iowa. I already figured that was a given. So I wrestled to stay in shape for football, but I stopped growing at 5'10".
So your family was just a bunch of boys, athletes, super competitive growing up?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, customarily Croatians are really big people. So all my brothers were 6'5", 6'4", and but I was the runt. And for all I know, it could have happened because I cut so much weight all the time from 6th grade on. All through my life into my early 40s as a fighter. So who knows? That may have done it, but I was I'm kind of a runt when it comes to Croatians.
But it's probably a blessing though, because if you went on, if you were bigger, maybe you wouldn't have gone on to to wrestle at the junior college level, then get into MMA. We'll get into that in a second here, but so you grow up wrestling and naturally, it seems like you're a fighter, right? Had a lot of the street fights and whatnot growing up. Right. So then you go to junior college. Where'd you go to junior college at? Out on the outskirts of Iowa, right?
First place was Sioux Empire, and it's kind of a long story, but Mike Wolf went there with me, Terry Van Winkle, and Tommy Saldivar, all of us from Bettendorf. Mike Wolf from American Pickers. So we all went there at the same time, but there was a scandal, kind of a scam going on. The administration, the dean, the faculty were in on them. Some of them were in on this scheme. They gathered all the student athletes at that school into the auditorium, and we were in the auditorium, and the faculty got up and they spoke, some of them, and said, customarily we see big problems with student athletes not being able to manage their money, their Pell Grants, their, this money, that money. So what we're going to do is we're going to have you guys sign your checks over to us, and there's hundreds of athletes there, right? So you're going to sign over your money, your checks to us. We're going to put it in an account, and we're going to pay for your classes and your books and everything accordingly as, the year progresses so that you don't mismanage your money. And I looked at Mike Wolf and I said, they're at very least collecting the interest off this account, if not taking it all, right? And Mike and I got up and we walked. Yeah. So Mike and I got up and we walked out, and I actually called an FBI department in that area. I think actually it was in Des Moines that I called, and they ended up investigating it, and all those people got arrested for embezzling something like $6.8 million from that school. They closed that school down. So then I went to Kirkwood for a little bit also, and then my mom got sick with heart problems, and I just basically had to come home and help pay bills there. I was working 3 jobs, making ends meet, and then and that's how I ended up deciding that I wasn't done competing. It was kind of an interesting story. Sorry to drag on, but
no,
I was pouring I was pouring concrete one day, and the mechanic for the company was a real big concrete company, and the mechanic that worked on all the diesels and the equipment and everything else was a black belt in karate, and he started jawing with me. I think he was a Tennessee guy originally, so he was jawing at me in his Tennessee accent that a karate man could destroy and kickboxer could destroy a wrestler, and this is long before the UFC. And I said, "Hey man, lunchtime, let's do it." And so lunchtime we went out in the field, and I just double legged him and slapped him around, and he couldn't get away from me and realized that he had run his mouth a little too quick. And then he gave me a free week pass to go to a karate kickboxing gym, and said, "Just come up and try it." He goes, "I think you'd probably be pretty good at it," because I had boxed a little bit when I was younger also. So went up there, and that's kind of that's how it all got started, and me getting into martial arts.
Now, what time is this? Is it like the 80s, 90s?
80s, yeah. I mean, you know what? You could ask me, what date I won the UFC title. I cannot tell you. I don't even know the year because I just don't pay attention to any of that stuff. I just, all my belts and all the other stuff are in boxes in my basement. I just, whatever. That's a different life. I do different things now, obviously. And, It was fun.
So this is the 80s. And at this point, people have no idea about wrestlers or MMA. And most people probably thought Mike Tyson could beat any man in the world, when in reality, Alexander Karelin could probably have kicked his ass. I mean, who knows, right? But this is kind of the early days. If
they they have to get close enough to hit you, you're close enough to grab them, and generally that's how things would end, in fights like that.
Right. And so you get into kickboxing with the wrestling background. You're one of the first mixed martial artists. How did you transition that to this event in Chicago where I think you had like your first MMA fight and went into kind of a career in UFC? How did that all transpire?
I was fighting K1 Rules Kickboxing up in Chicago. And a guy that refereed a couple of my fights, Joe Goitia, who's a really good martial artist out of Chicago, he still has a gym up there. He called me one day and he said, "Hey man," he goes, "there's a tournament up here, 8-man tournament, no rules, no time limits, in a cage. It's winner take all. Second place gets no money. But he goes, I think I can get you in this thing. And I go, wait a minute, no weight divisions, no rules? And he goes, no biting and no eye gouging, that's it. And I go, sign me up, man. Sign me up. So I went up there. Yeah, I won that. And then I won the second one. It was called the Battle of the Masters. And won the second one. And they actually brought in a K1 world kickboxing champion that was Andrei Dudko from Russia. He looked exactly like Ivan Drago from Rocky. I kid you not. It freaked me out when I saw him. I'm like, dear God, this guy's a monster. But he luckily was crappy at wrestling. For that one Russian that didn't know how to wrestle very good, right? But he was a devastating striker. So he and I were on opposite sides of the brackets, and we met in the championship, and I ended up choking him out in, I don't know, like 2.5 minutes or something, and won the second one. So, but yeah, that was me off to the races.
And is that the one where you broke your forearm? I read somewhere like your first fight, you broke your forearm and got super tired.
No,
and that's when you realized how hard you had trained.
That was my first kickboxing match. I fought a Illinois State kickboxing champion. And first round, pretty early, I hit him with a spinning back fist and shattered my forearm and had to finish a 5-round fight with a broken arm. And definitely learned that you gotta modify as the fight goes on when things get ugly. So my training definitely ramped up from there. I was a right hand. I could throw bombs with my right hand. My left arm seemed almost useless back then. And after I broke my arm, I had it in a cast for a long time, because it was a pretty bad break. So I just worked jabs and hooks and uppercuts with my lead hand nonstop, and it ended up giving me, a lead hand that I could control fights with.
So, okay, you kind of use that as your advantage then. Now was Michael Nunn around the Quad Cities at this time, or is that later?
Oh, no, Michael Nunn was around. Yeah. Okay. And he was around that time was when he was the reigning world champ, pound for pound best fighter in the world. We trained out of the same boxing gym.
Oh, you did? Okay. Yeah, that's a crazy story. A lot of people don't know about. Sad story, really. But, I mean, this guy was like the legit world champ, like Sugar Ray Leonard world champ level, right? Yeah.
Well, you say it's a sad story, but he's the one that wrote it.
Right.
So there's not much you could say.
Now, was his boxing coach the one hanging out at your gym when you were running Miletich Fighting Systems? Pena?
That was his nephew. Alvino Pena was my boxing coach. Alvino, okay. He started the Davenport Boxing Club, trained, a lot of incredible boxers. And I asked him why he did it one day. And he and I actually got along really well. He never yelled at me. He yelled at everyone else, but he never yelled at me. I think he just maybe figured I had work ethic. I didn't need to be yelled at or whatever.
Right.
But I asked him, I said, why do you put up with this shit, man? There's so many kids that come in here that disrespect you and stuff like that. I go, why do you put up with that? And he said, before my oldest son left for Vietnam, my son got drafted, and he said, Dad promised me if I make it back alive that you'll quit drinking. And so he promised him he would. And unfortunately, Alvino's oldest son, was killed in Vietnam, and he stopped drinking immediately and just dedicated his life to raising all these kids from the wrong side of the tracks and taking care of them for his entire life. I mean, I can't even imagine how many thousands of kids went through his tutelage, and it changed a lot of lives. So it's a really, really interesting story.
So he used boxing as a way to get kids off the streets, so to speak.
Yeah, and he lost his son in Vietnam, and I think that was his way of being around kids and boys, and his sons were great boxers, Pat Pena, Mike Pena, a bunch of them. And then Matt Pena was a very good boxer, and he, like I said, as you mentioned, was in my gym helping train the guys in their striking with their boxing. And so, yeah, it was, the roots are pretty deep there.
Yeah, I mean, the Quad Cities is, for the folks who aren't from that area, 2 cities in Illinois, 2 cities in Iowa, and what used to be a major hub for manufacturing combines and tractors. My grandpa was a welder at Case IH, retired from there, but like many of those towns, he was a welder at Case IH for a long time. I can remember going in there the day he retired. and it was like 130 degrees in there because it was the middle of summer. And he's like, we worked in this for 30 years. So just a really tough life, tough town. But like many of these manufacturing towns, when we started shipping jobs overseas, the economy collapsed a little bit. And so,
Right.
you know, that's kind of like the MO for the Quad Cities. But out of nowhere, you have an incredible career in the UFC. You're the first champ. You defend it 4 or 5 times. But then you start what I consider, many people consider, the first MMA training school, the Miletich Fighting System, and went on to train, world champs at almost every level. Jenz Pulver, Matt Hughes, Robbie Lawler, Sylvia. So how did that kind of come to be from just being a fighter to running a gym and getting all these people to migrate to the little known area of the Quad Cities?
Well, I mean, I opened my own gym pretty early on, and because the kickboxing and karate school that I started at, they just didn't understand the wrestling mentality, how to train correctly, all that sort of stuff, and so I decided it was time for me to do my own thing. He had gotten in some legal trouble, the guy that owned the gym, so it was time for me to split away from that. And so, yeah, I rented a racquetball court. I was given some wrestling mats by a guy that was going to throw these old wrestling mats away, and I put them on the floor and the wall of this racquetball court, and we just turned it into a battle box. And I knew that I needed good training partners, so I had to take guys that were, whether they were a wrestler or not, I had to get them as good as possible, as fast as possible, so that I had good training partners, and that's how the coaching started, and then it kind of just snowballed from there.
And that's interesting that the sport was so new that you had to train fighters to get them so you could get better yourself. So it was. Go ahead. It's just amazing. And what was most apparent about the training system from my readings and just from hearing stories is, you took that wrestling mentality and applied that to training, right? You think about jiu-jitsu, and I like jiu-jitsu a lot, but it's real laid back. You might drill for 30 minutes and roll for 30 minutes, and that's it.
Right.
I've never had any experience with kickboxing, but it's not like a wrestling room, right? Where it's literally, you're coming every day and you're strapping it on and anything could happen, right? So You kind of applied that to fighting at an early age.
Right. Yeah, no, it had to be intensity. I made sure that, everything that we did in practice as far as, when it came to training, strength and conditioning stuff and fight speed training, it had to be, especially the strength and conditioning, had to be more misery than any fight could ever be. Just because after breaking my arm in a fight, even though I was in great shape, I panicked a little bit and it fatigued me, and I had to struggle through that fight a little bit, endurance wise also. So I never wanted to feel that again, and I never wanted any of my guys that I trained to have that kind of problem, to lose because of fatigue. It's just not an excuse. That falls back on you. And so I just made it very intense, and most people wouldn't stick around for that level. They wouldn't venture into the room for very long, just because it was so intense. And and the guys that did stick around got really good, and it just snowballed from there. And that's kind of how it just built. It was built.
And is it true that the reason you tried to weed guys out was really because of a tragedy you witnessed early on in the mixed martial arts circles, when that fighter actually passed away in a fight in Chicago, and you kind of realized, shit, man, I can't have any guys in there who can't hack it? Or is that more rumor than anything else?
No. What happened, I was a special guest at a kickboxing event in Chicago. And there was a kid that got in the ring, and I went, ooh, this kid's not in shape at all. And then once he started fighting, it dawned on me that he had no training either. And it ended up tragically. He got hit with the right hand, went down, got back up, and then collapsed. And there was no ring doctor there. He was downstairs tending to a kid with a broken nose. And I'm sitting there just as a special guest. I don't know this kid from Adam. And the referee's standing over him counting, and I see the kids having some serious trouble. So I immediately climbed through the ropes. As I got in the ropes and pulled his mouthpiece out, 2 more guys climbed through the ropes and said they were volunteer firemen. And right when they got in there, they stretched out. The kid stretched out, stopped breathing, and his pupils dilated instantly, right in front of me. And I went. He just stopped breathing, guys. Start breathing for him. And I was trying to feel for a pulse, but none. In the end, he passed away while we were working on him. He turned, dark blue, and so that was something that was very lasting for me. It was horrible to experience. And I never wanted any of the athletes that trained with me to have for me to have to tell their parents, that they got seriously hurt or killed because they weren't properly trained. So a lot of people didn't like me back then. People that would come in and watch practices thought that I was too extreme and too much of a jerk, and they called me a prick and everything else. And people would write me letters and say, you're cruel, you're this, you're that. But they didn't understand what my motivation was. That nobody belonged in the cage unless they were absolutely 100% committed, in great shape, strong, knowledgeable, and had great techniques so that tragedy, didn't come. So, I was okay with that. I was perfectly fine with that. And, I think everybody in the room that stayed around was that committed also. They understood why I was the way I was, and that's why they stuck around.
Well, it's interesting because when I would come around the gym with Steve Rusk, and we could talk about him a little bit, but, you would come in there and there would be Matt Hughes and his twin brother, Jenz Pulver, Lawler was there, Tim Sylvia was there, and everyone would be going really hard, Spencer Fisher. But I didn't know that was any different. And then to start reading some of these articles about you getting ready for this, to hear why you did that makes so much more sense now.
Yeah. And those guys were, because people would travel from around the country and around the world to train with us. They'd come say, hey, I'm going to train with you for a fight. Or somebody would say, hey, I'm going to move to Iowa. And I'd say, you do not move to Iowa. Do not move to Iowa. Come here for a week. See if you like it. See if the guys like you. And then if you get done with an entire week and you want to come back, then we can talk. But they still would just show up with U-Haul trucks and sleeping in my parking lot of my gym, like, what the hell are they doing? And, but most of these guys would show up on a Sunday in town, come to the first training Monday morning, and then by Wednesday night after sparring, they were done. They were going home. They're like, this is not for me. The sport is not for me, because they were maybe the best guy in their gym. But then when they come to our gym, at one time we had over 45 guys that were ranked in the top 10 in the world in different weight divisions. So everybody that you grabbed was a monster. So you got no easy goes. Everyone was trying to pull each other's arms off and smash each other and making each other sharp. And there was a lot of camaraderie and intensity. And most people that weren't up to speed with that, weren't used to that atmosphere, they just fall apart and quit. So the ones that, like I said, the ones that stuck around were golden.
So how did you guys, when you guys sparred, was it like all out sparring, or like did you do it every day, or like what was the routine for the week when you were still back?
No, I mean, Monday would be, Monday night would be a lot of times takedowns, and then when we do groups of three, winner stays on the mat, then loser stays on the mat type stuff. Of course, we drill to start out, warm up correctly. Mm-hmm. And then when I noticed people starting to get sloppy, injuries probably were getting close to start happening because everybody was getting fatigued, battling for takedowns and everything, then I'd say, all right, get a drink, and then we're going to just go to the ground. We're just going to stay on the ground and work and submission grappling and stuff like that. Sometimes we would put the boxing gloves on and drill, sparring with takedowns. And then Tuesday was just strictly grappling drills, all kinds of grappling drills and live grappling. Then Wednesday was just sparring, stand-up sparring. And then Thursday we'd be back to grappling. Friday back to striking. Saturday was a lot of mixed stuff, strength and conditioning and everything. And then Sunday was off.
Wow. You had just some freaking killers in there doing this every day. And, what was funny about the gym was that it was a gym where, like, there was like a treadmill room, right? And there would be these moms in there on the treadmills, and like people just doing their normal workouts. And then like during the water breaks, people would come out and they can be bleeding from the face. You'd have these absolute world champion savages in there, like training a room over from the moms on the treadmill. It was hilarious.
Yeah, and most of the people that were members at the gym and stuff were okay with it. They obviously the new members would be a little startled by it, but I think it was pretty neat. And the thing about mixed martial arts at the time and still today, people that focus and are experts in grappling only say, look, I get it. Most people, you really don't want to get punched in the head for a living. I get it. That's okay. Businessmen, doctors, even just housewives or business women or just people from different walks of life who would get really good at grappling could come to the advanced grappling class and grapple with, all the world champions and world ranked fighters. And many times they were, catching the fighters in submissions also because they were so good on the ground. And so there's no other sport. You and I can't walk onto an NFL football field in practice and say, hey, you know what? Let me play tailback a little bit. Let me run the ball up the middle and show you what I got. You just can't do that in any other professional sport. But someone who is a non-professional athlete who can get really good at this stuff with jiu-jitsu and wrestling can climb in with the fighters and train with them.
It was unreal. And that's exactly what the team, like the guys who I would come with would do, like Tyler Clark, who was the state champ and junior national champ. Those guys would come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays and roll with like a Spencer Fisher. And to your point, they'd be so freaking tired that sometimes you could catch them, right? And they got pretty heated in there if something like that happened. But it was a really cool environment. And, I don't know what it's like now with some of these gyms. Like, I consider AKA to be very similar to what you used to do. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but they seem like they go all out all the time. Do you know much about those guys? Are you close with that gym?
I think that they train quite a bit like we used to. Maybe not all out all the time, but certainly when they do go hard, they go real hard. And I think it shows in, the number of champions that they've produced over there. And like my old saying is you can't become a professional race car driver by practicing on the interstate going 70 miles an hour. It's just, you can't do it. So stimulating a fight without getting into a fight, when you're all padded up, you're in the gym, there's people observing, paying attention, making sure nobody gets hurt as much as possible. And everybody being responsible as far as, look, if I land a big punch, I throw a 3-punch combo and my hook lands clean and I see a guy wobble, I'm not going to go for the kill and finishing. I'm not going to try and knock him out. I'm going to back off, start going to the body. And that's what I would tell all the fighters, the same thing. If I see somebody get rocked a little bit, I'd say, go to the body, stay to the body, do not hit him in the head anymore, things like that.
Right. And one of the guys who was in there, and last kind of thing on the fighting stuff before we get into what you're doing now, who really was kind of unknown at that time, was Robbie Lawler. I know what you're going to say, but I got to ask, what happened with that fight with Ben Askren, man? Was he out? Was he not out? What's your professional opinion on that? 'Cause I'm a huge Askren fan. I just love, and Lawler, but I'm just curious what you thought happened.
Yeah, and I like Ben Askren a lot too. And but Herb Dean really screwed the pooch on that one because he grabbed Lawler's right arm to check it, and Lawler gave him the thumbs up, and he didn't even pay attention to the arm after he grabbed it. So if I grab your arm to check and see if you're conscious, I'm therefore going to pay. I'm telling you, I need you to give me a signal with that arm to tell me that you're okay, right? Lawler did that. Lawler gave him a thumbs up, and then he jumped in and stopped it. It made zero sense, and Herb knows he screwed up. Everybody over at the UFC knows it was a screw up, but somehow I'm still a little bitter, to be honest with you, that there was no rematch because Lawler didn't lose that fight. There was, that was complete. And Dana White admitted it to me on the air. When I was calling fights on Access TV, Mark Cuban's network. Dana sat down for an interview with us, and I asked him about it, and he goes, Herb really screwed that one up bad, but yeah, that's the thing that I have no idea how they go from that situation to Askren now fighting Masvidal and Lawler not fighting. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't understand that. I thought for sure there would be a rematch. And you could honestly say at the beginning of that fight, they could have stopped the fight for Lawler. Askren was in serious trouble at the beginning of the fight.
Oh, Askren was getting his ass handed to him.
Bad. I mean, I've never seen Lawler look as good physically as he did in that fight. The guy was a freaking specimen. And I don't even know, is he like 35, 38? He's old. I mean, but he keeps
34,
looking better every time
34.
I see him.
I think he's 34. Which
so
is
you
not
mentioned
old, really.
No, not really. Not at all. So what are you doing nowadays, Pat? Are you still with Legacy Fight Alliance? Are you doing commentating? I know you have a conspiracy podcast.
Well, I work on
the
I work on the network TV side. So I don't work for LFA. I work for Mark Cuban's Access TV.
Okay.
So I do that. Then I've got a podcast called The Conspiracy Farm that I host. We've got listeners in over 100 countries, millions of downloads. So that's doing really well, picking up steam. And then also working on launching a clothing line called Survival Skin Clothing. That'll be performance clothing for combat athletes, for clothing, wicking material for, say, soldiers and law enforcement to wear underneath their ballistic vests, base layers for hunters, fishermen, ultra runners, anybody that's doing anything, intense basically is what the clothing line is going to be created for. And there'll be different waves of development that we're going to go through.
Okay. Now the conspiracy stuff, this piques my interest because I'm obsessed with conspiracy. I shouldn't say obsessed, but I like looking at things from a different angle. Like what are some of the topics you guys have covered? Have you done like moon landing stuff? Have you covered like Bob Lazar and the UFO stuff? Like where you guys?
We've gotten into some of the extraterrestrial stuff, the ancient the Sumerian Kings list, the Emerald Tablets. We had on Billy Carson, who's an MIT propulsion scientist, talking about the ancient civilizations, Sumerian Kings list, the Emerald Tablets. We get into geopolitical and domestic policy stuff. I mean, we were talking about who was funding ISIS. I mean, 6 months after ISIS started, I would pose questions to mainstream media people and say, listen, you got to start being honest with it. I know you guys are paid to lie, but I mean, it's pretty obvious right now. And I'd ask a mainstream media person, I'd go, all right, listen, let me ask you this question. And if you don't know the answer to it, at least try and find out. I go, who's doing the banking for ISIS oil transactions with Turkey? Could you maybe dig into that a little bit and tell me who's doing the banking? Because it's happening. They took over the refineries. They're selling the oil. So
no shit.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we funded ISIS. We build ISIS. A 50,000 man army doesn't just appear out of nowhere with high-tech weapons. They get paid and they're handed a lot of weapons, and there's a massive Jordanian training facility that some of my friends have worked in, who were training guys that, the name Ali and Muhammad and things like that. And a few years later, you got ISIS, and it is what it is. But it's obvious that the last administration created that, and it is what it is. We get into a lot of that stuff. It's like Bashar al-Assad in Syria. The day after Trump announces that we're going to get out of Syria, that Trump wants us out of Syria, the very next day there's a chemical attack, and the mainstream media is trying to blame Bashar al-Assad with hitting his own citizens with chemical weapons. The day after Trump says we're leaving. Why would Bashar al-Assad kill his own citizens and get bombed more by us in Israel? None of it. They keep using the same playbook over and over, and it's just the globalists trying to do their thing and take resources, and we just report the truth. We go after Democrats, we go after Republicans. We don't care, if they're doing the illegal stuff and funding terrorist factions with American tax dollars. Well, we're going to say something.
Now, do you believe there's anywhere you can get good news on like the major networks today, or is it all slanted significantly?
It'll be in bits and pieces, but they'll either just not report on it, or they'll just report it in a totally different light. The NDAA part of that that was passed, in stages, but the part that was passed where it was legal for the media to put out propaganda, to lie to the American people. That was passed when Obama was in office. So, people, the thing that's frustrating for me is that citizens actually defend the media when the media is actually lying to you, lock, stock, and barrel. And it's very unfortunate that, it's like they say, it's harder to convince people they've been fooled than to fool them in the first place.
And thank God for the internet, because before that, all people knew was the news, which you can realize now how insane that is to comprehend. To only get your facts from the news, because it's obviously not the most credible spot. Do you ever have Eddie Bravo on there? I would think that guy would eat that up, man, going on your show.
Eddie Bravo and I and Sam Tripoli and my co-host have done what we call swap casts, where our shows will combine into one show and we'll just have a big discussion. And
no way.
And yeah, Eddie's been part of it, definitely.
Is he as crazy? I'm a massive fan of the Joe Rogan podcast. I've been following it for about 8 years. Is he as crazy as he is there in real life?
He's very passionate about what he believes. I'll tell you that. And
yeah.
he's a lot of fun to talk to. Of course, I don't subscribe to the flat Earth thing. But Eddie seems to think it's legit. And hey, man, that's it is what it is. But no, he's a very bright guy, actually, and obviously very intelligent.
Oh yeah.
The creating and the jiu-jitsu style that he has, and all the great jiu-jitsu people that have come out underneath him.
Yeah, no, 10th Plane, it's awesome. And when I say crazy, I mean that in the best possible way. I love his take on things, and he got me looking at a number of different things differently. So Pat, right. I know it's the day after the 4th. You lead a busy life. I just wanted to close down here with 3 kind of more so rapid fire questions, getting back to the kind of the wrestling days, and then we'll let you go. Is that fair?
Yeah, sure.
Great. So first question is, if they had MMA around back in the 80s and 90s, who would have been a better MMA fighter, Tom Brands or Royce Alger?
Tom Brands.
Okay. Is there anyone in any way in any organization that you think can beat Khabib Nurmagomedov?
I mean, I would say style matchup wise, that would have to be somebody like Askren. If Askren and he could meet at a catch weight, Lawler could beat the Russian. But at his weight right now, I don't know, man. That's Ferguson. Ferguson has a chance, of course.
Ferguson's awesome. Yeah.
But not going to be easy for any of those guys to do, because they can't wrestle at his level, and he is he's a pretty rugged dude, man. He can take shots.
I like to see Woodley in there because Woodley's so explosive, and I think his wrestling, could be on par. But man, that's a big weight jump, and I don't know how many fights Khabib has left.
Right. Well, he's still undefeated, so he hasn't taken a ton of damage.
No. And then last question, Pat, and I ask this to everybody, but if you had to kind of summarize in a few words, what has wrestling taught you about life, or why are you grateful to have it in your past? I mean, or what has it done for you? What would you say to that as we kind of sign off here?
I think it gives you a mental and physical edge, period, because you've been tortured mentally and physically. You've years and years in the hot wrestling rooms and getting beat up by your buddies and cutting weight over and over and over throughout a season, year after year after year. It just mentally makes you tough enough to deal with almost anything in life, any downfall, any bad turn of luck. It really imprints a work ethic and a mindset for life that just very few other sports, maybe swimming, is as difficult or more difficult, depending on how you look at it. But that's why I got my daughters into swimming from the time they were age 5. Their work ethic is incredible. We don't have to tell them to do anything. They do everything they're supposed to do, straight A's, and get up at 4:30 in the morning to go to practice. They do what they're supposed to do, and that's the mentality that you want to pass on to your kids, and that hopefully they pass on to theirs.
Yeah, there's something about the individualistic sports that seem to bring that out. Swimming, no doubt, it's so freaking grueling.
Yeah.
And I think with with wrestling, it's the fact that there's nowhere to hide if something goes wrong, and it's the accountability. I think accountability is something that's probably lacking a lot more now than it used to be, and that seems to be a common theme and something you hit on. Well, cool, man.
Yeah,
well,
and you learn. You learn how to be humble in wrestling. You get humbled often.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just not a day goes by where you're not challenged in some way or another. I mean, listen to John Smith. Even he had bad practices after he had won several World Olympic titles that made him question things. You know, so it's kind of that questioning and inner self-reflection is always happening in the sport.
Right.
Well, thank you for your time, sir.
I appreciate it. And when you see Steve Rusk, punch him for me and see if that works out for you.
That guy, I wouldn't do that to you if I had $1 million.
I trust me, I wouldn't punch him either. I know better.
He used to do this thing when we were grappling. He used to put his whole hand over someone's mouth. Like, it was legal, but it was the dirtiest thing I ever saw in my life.
He was doing that before anybody ever thought of it.
God, man. And I wonder, like, what was it like to be Tim Sylvia wrestling that guy when you first moved from Maine to your gym? I mean, it had to be a tough couple of months for him.
Well, I mean, there was a while there where Steve, not to carry on too long, but I'll just finish with this.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah.
There was a while where Steve Rusk would grab Tim and throw him down. Tim was the reigning UFC champion, heavyweight champion. He couldn't do anything to stop Steve. Steve would grab him, throw him down, fish hook his mouth until blood was coming out of it, gouge his eyes with his thumbs until Tim's eyes were black and blue and swollen shut. And, I mean, Tim would literally scream bloody murder and couldn't get away from him. And Steve would just laugh the whole time and bully and pick on the heavyweight world champion.
That's the end of this episode, but definitely not the end of the show. For more episodes, please go to WrestlingChangeMyLife.org. Subscribe to us on iTunes. Give us a star rating. Show the love, baby. Show the love. Thank you so much. We'll see you again soon. Peace.